ערב טוב לכולם. אני אומר כמה מילים באנגלית עבור האנשים שנמצאים בבית, ואנחנו אז נעבור לעברית. Hello everyone from Israel, and welcome. Thank you for joining Tsenshab Rinpoche's teachings. We will start our teachings with a recitation of a praise to Manjushri, then the Heart Sutra, then we will make a mandala offering is a token for requesting the teachings, and then Rinpoche will lead the way with refuge and bodhicitta for correcting and motivation. We shall do the recitations in Hebrew, and so for those of you at home, you can do your recitations in your own languages, or Simon might also share some materials if he has some. All right, thank you.
So we'll begin the teachings with the two prayers, and then the praise, homage of praise to Manjushri. I'll read the translation from Shravasti's. It's called Klang Loma in Tibetan. Homage to my guru, protector Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are. Wisdom shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the two obscurations, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of a parent for their only child. All wanderers caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our afflictions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, you've completed the stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, being pure from the beginning. I bow down to you, O Manjushri. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Awaken my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Now, the Heart Sutra. Homage to the Bhagavati Prajnaparamita. Thus I have heard, at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgriha, at a Vulture Peak mountain, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time the Blessed One entered an absorption on categories of phenomena called perception of the profound. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva and great being, beheld the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and saw that the five aggregates are empty of nature. Then, through the Buddha's power, Venerable Sariputta and said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva and great being, how should a child of noble family who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom train? This is what he said, and the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva and great being, replied to Venerable Sariputta as follows. O Shariputra, son of noble family or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom should regard things in this way. They should see the five aggregates to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, sensation, recognition, conditioning factors, and consciousness are emptiness. Therefore, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. They are without characteristics. They are unrising and unceasing. They are not tainted and not untainted. They are not deficient and not complete. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, no recognition, no conditioning factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no texture, and no mental objects. There is no I element up to no mind element, and as far as no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance up to no old age and death, no extinction of old age and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, no origin, no cessation, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide by the perfection of wisdom. Since their minds are unobscured, they have no fear. They completely transcend error and reach the ultimate nirvana. All the Buddhas throughout the 3 times fully awaken to unsurpassed, genuine, and complete enlightenment by means of the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra that equals the unequaled, the mantra that pacifies all suffering, is not false and should thus be understood as true. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is as follows: Ngati gati paragati parasamgati buddhisoha. Shariputra, a bodhisattva and great being, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom in this way. Thereupon the Blessed One arose from that absorption and commended Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva and great being. Excellent, excellent indeed, O son of noble family. That is how it is. That is how it is. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have taught, and then even the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva and great being, together with the whole assembly in the world of gods, human beings, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the speech of the Blessed One. This concludes the Mahayana Sutra of the Blessed Mother, the heart of the transcendent perfection of wisdom. Chalporo lo sambalendo balancho chandamina ladanda bab nayaptanayap shen yedantan machata. Amen yengeta rimpoche rivo pa samgishi to chapa pa mange pai lato novo rimpoche namale samar rimpoche konwar Mapa Rinpoche, Techin Boy Mache, Jamin Mache, Techin Boy Agama, Tring Matawa, Ribyama, Timbama, Nasama, Tichama, Nima, Tawa, Rinpoche, Tu, Chonle, Number Gavigas, So now is the short mandala offering. This ground anointed with perfumes, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. And now it's a prayer to request to turn the wheel of the Dharma. Perfect, pure, holy gurus, from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya. Please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the earth of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Guru Ratnam Mandala Kamdiya Talayami. Take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of practicing generosity and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of practicing generosity and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So just repeat one time in Hebrew. Should we repeat this prayer? Savior of the Snowland teachings and transmigratory beings who extensively clarified the path that unifies emptiness and compassion to the lotus in the hand. Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be and it's a prayer to the Gurus to please bestow all the qualities of the three of body, speech, and mind, and abide in our hearts.
대바 방부 시부지요래 공부로르고 대바 상만로 직 들은가 상한 주기 미주기 좀 된들 대바 혀 직보 춘이요 말에 가르치는 선은 다 배나 측제 딜라 직 세베이나 단다 측제 당부디 가르사 얘들 측제디 폰 피게 하셔 봐서 뒤 어디래 다 측제디 가서 얘한테 곧 고디치 러비네.
상기 초미스.
다네 상기 초민진스. 세르제 솔로미다양스. 강시 리버 뎀비치 티니 코나 잡수진 니스체제. 다디베 측제 딩원의 삼로지 땅토베이다. 땅 아주마소네 산지 줌된데 니 산지 줌된데 거린 제수 참바다. 산지 줌된데 대바제바디 차과 왕도 송아 많이 봐. 중세 양다게就是长期 아니 니 산지 좀 된들이야 제수 두고 유스 접수 두고 유스 어떤 송야 되가 저기 지금 랜드 점시 들은 것한다 제가 개와 상부를 이남이 망부지 하란도 최고 망부지기 다 들은 것은 최제단디 낭취 다 지기 옆에 손으로지 여러데 이내 삼로 뒤 줘서 누구 연하면서 더 봐야지 여러.
And so here, at the beginning of the teachings, I'm going to recite a verse. I'll put it in the group chat later, which states that it's sorry. There's in the group chat. I'll put this verse in the group chat later on. It's a verse from Nagarjuna, who appeared around 600 or 700 years after the time of the Buddha, and it's a particular verse that Nagarjuna wrote. And of course, Nagarjuna wrote many varieties of praise to the Buddha and to the Buddha Bhagawan, the Bhagawan Buddha. But the kind of sort of praises that we sort of think about or make, and the praises of today and the praises back then to that Nagarjuna made to the Bhagawan Buddha are not the same at all. And this verse, which is called praises the Buddha to be more excellent than the gods. And the reason expresses the reason why Nagarjuna praises the Buddha. He says, "I do not favor the side of the Buddha, nor do I harbor any hatred towards Kapila and others," who is the leader of the Samkhya school. "Whoever speaks words imbued with reason, that person I shall accept as my teacher." So here Nagarjuna is expressing that the reason why it's discussing how he expressing how he remembers the great kindness of the Bhagawan Buddha, and also talks about how his way of developing faith in the Buddha, and that he says that this doesn't come from attachment, but it's grounded in a strong basis of reason, and grounded in a strong basis of reason. That then in that that is the person that I will follow. That is the person I'll take refuge in. And of course, we say this is still a very sort of fortunate time, and a fortunate time to be able to hear the teachings. But I do have a doubt as to, I wonder whether many of the practitioners who sort of engage with Buddhist teachings really understood the context of how to sort of take refuge and develop faith in the Buddha in this context that is being expressed here by Nagarjuna. And so whether people really follow and sort of engage with the teachings in this way of not based in attachment, but by following one whose teachings are imbued with strong reason.
Finish? Okay. 다디 인도 전배 개체슈도 직디 어란주 다 드링어란주디 루루치에도 조디 상계비 최디 아니 간대지 이메당 라바도 드링데 주식 조디니 로종고르도가 안 라바도 양 다 로종이 땜벼다고 조지 반대 어디샤기 아니 송 장심의 왜 청왕스지 신도네 답에 자침부 그런 게 용왕 그러네마 송셔주지 린두선배 시부지 자침부지 아주 때디 초링치에서 우리 춘제치에 차디도 되게 응원될 당하란죠 얘나 지 꾸룽 숙축부지 셋답고 해야돼 아란죠 강년바당 아니 지기 아란도지네 지 시야기 최다 지란족이 니하기 최디니가로 아니 미유디 담바코만 속에 최디 가르쳐도 송으로서 최선으로버지 최고래 송 랍적게 만나신 아니 조 최세도 다 유어당 붙이 고고 요래 유어당 세도 셈을 유어 태우지 셈기 유어데 마테 응어라 아니 셈기 꾼디 응어스 붙이 셈기 꾼디 응어스 붙더니 아니 셈기 꾼기 아니 지기 매바딩에 간주서 토나 섬산로지 레지 로디 슈슈부지 고요르바 너마시 지난 좀 망치긴 킹그리 다디 인도점베디 나노네 케치슈 더버디 차상가 아니 공부루루고 단지 치 다들 롱창버디 난 여번나 신체지 아니 얘기 산지 쯤된디기 최디 아니 가서 그래 산지 쯤된디기 최들라니 아니 초진 시도 잠베 아니 차비 왕기 어때 지기 가서 그래 디퇴바단 처르비도 끼부시우스도 디 야고 시우지도서 파 첨바 맨스데 레지 삼로디기 왕교 로아 마리스 등수도와 디 란조양 참레 참말을 쓰기메 가시기야 란조 나바산집에 취디 지고 디 가서로 고문답지 잡아야 또스 총바다 엔데네야 지기 하바도 리줄 선롭데 되다 엔데네야 지기 답카도 라면 저도 아주 낭자 제다면 최근에 와샤도 낭자랑 봐 대연도 잠배야 지가 가서 그래 쥐다 애양 지기 알아서 손에 나게 아니 지기 장소제야로서 쇼 지금 왕부지 남랑 왕부지 드줄이야 아니 대바 쇼심부지 깨체 아니 최체지 용되게 요로 들은 거사 딘지 질레 온도 잠배 딘지디한 최초로 죽여를 라베이나 디페신 아주 양의 양도 란주게 셈로 따제 체체 디최도 죽음에베 손럽지 가르치는스나 최초선 로바지 가르치는스나 ranzugi 최신에 대 전제 좀 된 되게 파고에 된 바 시기 나로네 당보 최고로 당보도 거로 잠배 농년 된발 때문에 아니 최고로 송 잠배 농에 시벌 차 시시 얘는 아줄로만 손에 랍자 당슈들이도 와
So here, and so one of the most important things in relation to why we've gathered here today, to this sort of Dharma meeting and to discuss about to discuss about Buddhism and to sort of examine what are these Buddhist teachings like, and of course, there are many forms of the teachings and Buddhist teachings, but here we particularly have come together to examine this text by the Bodhisattva's Garland of Jewels by the great master Atiśa, which is a text sort of in the mind training genre of teachings, and this is a very extremely profound text in that it's grounded within Atiśa's own experience, and thus he spoke this text. And so at the beginning, very important for us to, as we come together to discuss and this meeting together to discuss and learn about the Dharma teachings, learn about the Buddhist teachings through this text, it's important for us to really set a very clear and strong motivation at the beginning, and to see so that whatever we listen to, and in my case for whatever I explain, so for the listeners, for whatever the kind of the Dharma they hear, then they should we should sort of examine whether this Dharma really becomes the kind of real Dharma or not, and what does it mean to become real Dharma? One of the important components of becoming the real Dharma is something which is able to transform our minds. But in order to transform our minds, we initially have to be able to identify the faults in our minds and our ways of thinking, and therefore we are also to examine how would we be able to remove those faults, and therefore to be able to transform our minds. So we must understand. This is very essential context right at the beginning in helping us to set our motivation. So in the verse that I mentioned, Nagarjuna's verse, where he's explaining about the how he doesn't take sides with the Buddha Dharma and the teachings. He doesn't just get some sort of good feeling or sort of a good vibration of listening to some of the teachings and having a good feeling, a few bits of pieces of teachings he's heard here and there, but he doesn't take sides at all with that, but instead sort of examines the teachings for those words imbued with wisdom, as he says in the verse. And so it's very common, but I don't think a lot of us are really engaged in that way. We may get involved with a little bit of within our sort of engagement with the Buddha's teachings to sort of do a little bit of meditation, perhaps practice some rituals. Perhaps since we're all Dharma practitioners here, I can speak rather bluntly and say that we may get involved in rituals or practice such as Chö or Tantra, sort of recitations of mantras or of sort of sadhanas and sort of praises and ritual practices. But we need to check within our mind again and again whether what we think is the Dharma, what we're doing really becomes the Dharma. And and I think that probably a lot of what we do doesn't really qualify to be the real Dharma, because what's needed in order to become the real Dharma is connected with the very first turning of the wheel, where the Buddha stated the Four Noble Truths. And here, even in the very heart of those Four Noble Truths, the first truth in the sense that he presents is the truth of suffering. And he says to us, you have to know suffering. And to really know what suffering is. So here we see already an extremely profound piece of advice that we need to be able to understand in order to help what we do as Dharma practice to become the real Dharma.
האם התרגול שאנחנו לוקחים על עצמנו הוא תרגול שמונע מהבנה של סבל אמיתי?
다 딘디지 인도 잠베 안체상가 ran 저기 녀리야 최 지금 고모주 응어라 녀바르도 아니 간주기 최기 design digma sone ko countries söyorslabina sanje jomden digi sungsha jugi chödi angaran zogi chigi kanyeji mangboji ge pa ani seege tabshejedo sungbe sonro ju yomare dingaran zogi semgi nanrola ya ani chigi kanye mangbo kasu jobena semgi nanrone ani dit 지기 쉬우 지기 가르쳐 그래 야고주 통나 이도 원sel을 하버다 용해 지금 아니 지금 두자주 통원도 신도네배 두자주 통원지 아니 디기 원게 차상기 원게 랑규 머시버치지 아니 가도이네 섬나 가냐 루즈머지 용야 디메비스에 쳐도 아니 산지기 최 디송원도 잠베 아니 동네 셰버차 세디 칸나노 거는도 스데야디 빼게 전부 인도 전배 세상가 알아주 최 가리 제마 셰디 랑규 셈게 차단용 문견원도 전배 디기루 제당도 삼로도 코치 안 디메바 쇠게 쳐도 아니 최치 유나 아니 거로지가 좀 마소네 랑가 뜨고 하나 최치세 랑가 간다 냐마 상지 좀 된데 코나주 회바나 신신 아주 딜은 누구 여바됐다 거롱 아주
and so, then in terms of the way that we should think about how we listen to the Dharma teachings and the sort of the framework in which we should think, then because of what I've just said, therefore, before we really sort of set out and begin our Dharma practice, we really need to sort of look at the sort of complete structure of how and why the Dharma teachings were presented by the Buddha, and sort of how to sort of it's complete design or structure, and how to sort of put all that, how it sort of all fits together, and how the Buddha spoke about that structure and design. And so it's the Buddha's system is not designed to just release us from our kind of general difficulties. Purpose is not merely for just releasing us from our regular kind of difficulties in life, but it has a very specific purpose. One of which is in the sense that when we engage with things and we see them as attractive, then we completely over exaggerate the qualities and see them as so incredibly fantastic. And then when we see something which we dislike and feels unpleasant and unattractive to us, we feel it's completely and utterly awful. And we have this very sort of huge sort of exaggeration caused by our attachment and our aversion. And these forms of attachment and aversion and over-exaggeration are what continually disturb our mental peace. And so the Buddha says to us, you know the suffering, so you have to know the suffering. And so this means to look at in whatever Dharma practice we're engaging in, we have to constantly see whether what we're doing as our Dharma practice is actually counteracting and calming down and counteracting the arisal of strong attachment and strong aversion, and then making a sort of clear statement to ourselves that this is the path, I'm going to follow this path, just in this Dharma path, in exactly the same way that the Buddhas followed this Dharma path, by working to help reduce these strong states of attachment and aversion.
This one. So this practice whether whatever that we are practicing, all the activities they are doing as in the name of Dharma, whether this is going through as a Dharma or not, it is very important for us whenever we are practicing, we need to certainly just don't follow the as your wish, like I'm doing the commitment, I'm doing the ritual, I'm doing the retreat, this is Dharma. So stop it there. Give yourself thought, is this real Dharma or not? We need to ask this. We should so proudly, confidently has to ask this question. I'm saying this not because I'm doing it correctly, but one of the greatest things I ever heard in my life through my teacher, through his practice and realization, which I really wanted to copy him, follow his footsteps, is one time when he was giving a teaching. He said, these days, how I practice and doing my commitments is changed a bit now. In the early times, I receive teachings from my teachers and their initiations, and I recite, and then I do the commitments because I have to. Now these days, when I go through it, then sometimes I just start it and then in the middle, sometimes I stop it and say like, is this Dharma? What I'm saying these things, meditating on this. And then maybe like an hour he has spent a time, then he just stops there and then say, he used this syllogism. Again, deeper to left. Syllogism, the Kiran, Ngelati, Marit Kiran, Juditi.
אז כשאנחנו שואלים את עצמנו לגבי תרגול מסוים שאנחנו עושים, שיהיה התרגול, כשיהיה כל דבר שאנחנו מתרגלים, כל הפעילויות שאנחנו עושים במסגרת הדרמה, אנחנו עושים אותם לשם הדרמה. האם מה שאנחנו עושים הוא אכן דרמה? האם זה דרמה? האם זה לא דרמה? אנחנו עושים את התרגולים האלה, לפעמים בוודאות, בביטחון עצמי כלל. יש לנו תרגולים מסוימים שאנחנו עושים. יש לנו מחויבויות שקיבלנו, אם לקחנו על עצמנו איזושהי עצמה טנטרית או איזושהי מחויבויות אחרות שבהן אנחנו צריכים לקרוא איזשהו טקסט מסוים. יש איזה ריצ'ול, איזשהו טקס מסוים שאנחנו עושים, או יכול להיות שאנחנו נכנסים לריטריט. אנחנו צריכים לעצור את עצמנו בשלב מסוים ולשאול את עצמנו, האם מה שאני עושה, האם זה דרמה או לא? לשאול את עצמנו, האם אני עכשיו מתרגל את הדרמה? לא שרימפוצ'ה אומר שהוא עושה את זה בעצמו בצורה מספקת, אבל לרימפוצ'ה יש מורה שאמר שמורה שהוא גם מתרגל, יש לו גם הבנות נכוחות, ורימפוצ'ה רוצה ללכת בדרכו ולקרוא, לקחת דוגמה, ולהפוך להיות כמו המורה שלו. ולהפוך להיות כמו המורה שלו. הוא אומר שיום אחד כשהוא שמע שיעורים מהמורה שלו אמר שהאופן שבו הוא מתרגל את הדרמה והתקופה הנוכחית השתנה בהשוואה לתקופות הקודמות. באופן שבו הוא קורא את המחויבויות שלו, גם את המחויבויות שלו, באופן שבו הוא מתרגל. האופן הזה השתנה באמצע. לפני כן, כאשר הוא לקח על עצמו העצמות טנטריות שבאות עם מחויבות מסוימת, לקרוא בצורה סדורה, מסודרת כל יום או מה שזה לא יהיה, איזשהו טקסט מסוים. הוא קרא אותו, אבל הוא קרא אותו כי הוא היה חייב לקרוא. הוא נדרש לקרוא. אבל הוא אמר שזה מה שהוא עשה קודם, ובימים אלה כשהוא מתחיל לקרוא את הטקסט, הוא עוצר בשלב מסוים. במחצית הקריאה, והוא שואל את עצמו, האם מה שאני עושה עכשיו זה דרמה, זה תרגול של דרמה? אני אומר דברים, אני אומר או מבטא דברים, אמור למדוד עליהם. הוא עוצר, שואל את עצמו, האם זה דרמה, והוא משתמש במה שנקרא סילוגיזם, או איזשהו פורמט מסוים, שבו מנסחים נימוק מסוים, ובוחנים האם הנימוק הזה הוא נימוק שהוא תקף.
就说，大家这个这个，呢，经济看着解决都是能才不如的了呀，可对呢，呢，这个怎么说呢 ？awareness, mindfulness 呀，修行不起，解脱的开始，syllogism 但挺大的时候吧，大样大的开始古语是呢，那个单单让给看着解决阶段切心把的确现是。 아니 최 내마지마인데스 최마인데스 발라네 하도스 최마인데스 아니 심규 두발라 가야 매편 비치를 직접 심규 무튜브 금전들의 양교도 세단치 다 단다 봐도 빼졌다야 디기 말한저 가르치는 아주 취치고래 세도 전배 아니 뇨모 마시기 봐도 아니 아주 띠부 연구 매바디 이 켈레인스 세상에 뇨모를 카드직 짜야게 된다라 니 최대 지도 전배 니 단다 강 지체베 최대 뇨모라 가게 만여바 인자 잉예리 최레면도 엔 신년 양교 간전치야 돼. 용고 주교시 잡지. 니 골론 선바 나버 답에 토네. 아니 강도도 쨈메다 즉 용화직 마도 매비 이나양 아니 되게 주민직 등의 중기 삼배 꾸네랑데 아니 최최지 슈되고요. 다 들은 것은 최최단데 요 전부지 루요스 도시죠. 다이야 아 랍지 중고요. 딩알 펜부시다 중. 저장네 디케란졸라야 다 안조마 손에 최지 시가 되는 교화지 땅고고 도나 어도스 땅고고 있으래.
And so I'd like to share with you this piece of advice that my teacher was giving to me in terms of how to sort of transform our way of our sort of motivational, the basis of our motivation, and our sort of advice on how to sort of really engage with the Dharma teachings by examining a sort of philosophical kind of statement, a syllogism about which he sort of developed because they study many syllogisms in the books, but this syllogism he developed himself, a sort of a proof statement, and thinking about all of the recitations, the practices and recitations, and all of the things that my teacher did in as his Dharma practice, and then bringing strong mindfulness and awareness to that, to look into the effectiveness of it. And so the syllogism that he came up with was, as a subject of the syllogism, this logistic statement, whatever I have done as my Dharma practice, whether it be recitations, sadhanas, mantras, whatever, or study, all of the things that I've done as my Dharma practice as the subject, and then the sort of thing to be, he says, none of that has really become the Dharma, or to speak more directly, it's not the Dharma. And the reason why it is not the Dharma is because it didn't help me to tame my mental continuum. And so so this raises the question of why we do the Dharma, what purpose we do the Dharma for. And of course, until we have exhausted all of the seeds, the mental afflictions and all of their seeds, until they're exhausted, we will always have the seeds for the arisal of mental afflictions within us. And of course, one of the main purposes of the Dharma is to destroy the mental afflictions. And so, what he's saying here is that my Dharma, all of the things that I've done, which I think of as my Dharma practice, have not really harmed the mental afflictions at all. And this is a sort of, and then he really had this strong sense of experience of that in his own practice, and then sort of really developed a sort of renewed and pure aspirational motivation. I mean, of course, it's contrived. It's not a sort of form of renunciation, or it's contrived. It's not uncontrived renunciation. But he really brought this renewed sense of pure motivation to his practice in order to think about, how whatever he did as Dharma practice should always be training his mind, and specifically challenging the mental afflictions. So this is the advice that my teacher gave to me, which I thought also might be useful to share with you in generating the context and motivation of why we do Dharma practice.
직송아 딘제기 다 삼로당당 징아란주나 우리야 직 충분히나 아니 아란주 방법이 지기다 단다봐도 간된 개조 지기요를 사장 지기요를 냐면 방법이 셰디요를 때 아니 타마텔이야 아란주기 배진 지기다 6년 접시대 참 접시대 진실의 표 아니 배쇼 어제 제샤답에 또 미스직 제샤베 당 아니 다 초직네 당진 디기 나르네 지기도 지기면도 알고네 도 당에 디 뇨모 도솜데 레도레메도 도 삼로 당제 디 매버지 소토나 지모롱 냐베 로딘지 제디니 지기다 디데 가야 마제비체지 아니 간된 교조당 아니 사장도 신의 대디니기 삼로 디니 니디 독샤베이나 배제 다 한바다 저기 요 말에데 문에 뇨모 도솜로 카드징이 자토버징이 채나 지모롱 냐베 삼로 딘지지 추지 제베이나 팬 디치그레스 삼구요레
So I think in terms of if we were to take all of the things that we do, so this is one way of thinking which I'd like to sort of present to us. If we take all of the sort of things that we do as our Dharma practice, so all the vast array of activities that we engage in as part of our Dharma practice, recitations, sort of meditation practices or recitations, virtuous practices, and doing purification practices and merit accumulating practices, nyungnes, the sort of purification practices, retreat, fire pujas, these incredible array of Dharma practices we're engaged in. And then if we think about the benefit of that, and then weigh that up against the benefit of thinking in terms of having this wish, wouldn't it be wonderful if I were able to do harm to my self-grasping, or at least to some extent to be able to suppress the self-grasping from arising, and really sort of be able to suppress the mental afflictions and the three poisons. Of course it does, actually doing that, even not actually that really happening, but just that wish, wouldn't it be wonderful if I were able to do that, to suppress the self-grasping and the mental afflictions and the three poisons? And then if we really weighed that up, to be able to challenge, take on those grasping, etc., and if we really sort of weigh that up against what our Dharma practice is doing, I wonder whether just that mere wish that it would be wonderful if I could do that may be more beneficial than all of the huge array of practices that are done as Dharma.
אז אנחנו רוצים להביא לאיזשהו שינוי מסוים בתרגול, זה כיוון מסוים שאפשר לבדוק אותו, לבדוק האם התרגול שלנו אכן פוגע באחיזה בעצמי.
다디로니 콩디 가리어스 세베나 아니 산지 준비된 디긴 도나로 가르송 요레스나 니 거실 준비 가와다 시와다 다 제가 나치기 동에 총거로 제가 나치기 동에 디긴 고백이 쳐도 애니 차라라 퇴바치 삼바치 엉공바치 슬라부요스 어디 숨도
There's a quote from the sutra that talks about how the Buddha sort of meditated on. I think I didn't hear this very clearly, but I think he said on how the Buddha sort of listened to or contemplated and meditated on. I think he said past and future lives, but I apologize. I didn't hear clearly what Rinpoche said.
다 딘디기 삼로디기 파도 안졸이야 아니 배낭을안주다 벽이 주주친구 시 주주친구 아스 망부 송고데 간제 진비 이날 단다 디조 안졸이야 커도 라고 창고에 개개요 말 딘디 삼로당야려야 사자 거주 니마 기루 디 단다 거동네 지나 균인 단다 저케요 말이 당봉어란 주 상계기 최기 닝부 접어디 모신야디 가르스나 아니 상계기 송샤족이 최기 나로니 아니 나란 주기 유기 뇨몽 매바 쇠베 쳐도 아니 가르서 그래 냐르야 뇨몽기 오 뇨몽기 첼레 뇨몽기 남바데조 오 야고 지셴베 토네 아니 뇨모 디기 아니 커두 갑데 짜데바 마임바 레라 커테 갑데 짜도 마임바 레당 뇨모 니기기 갑데 디기 쪼데라 다음에 또비 시럽데 마통나 아 가수시간 저 뇨모를 갑데 짜나 탕체야마도 요 말이 송지 아니 디메베 쇠베 쳐도 다음에 된지 다음에 되베 남샤 될야다 루더실레 루더시기 아니 고조 띵중기 남샤라마네베 토네 아니 동반이기 따와 땡라 팝 덴데 동반이기 따와데 땡라 팝원도 전배 아니 따외 공부 타르도버디 아니 공부루두기 슝드레스 되는 공부루두기 슝기 따와 땡라 팝단데기 아니 동반이기 다 또베기 아니 름바디기 안 토네 아니 신의 사제가닝 리즈마 집에 리셰 따외토는 또도 지금 리셰디 마라마나 시켜요. 즉 안을 하바도 상하게 슝나로네 아니 그지기 말한주 셈다 가서 라고 파가지 셈 타메토네 아니 둘루둘단들라 아니 신의 랑랑게 자외라메기 아니 당화 통모임부 여버도 상말로 아니 신의 땅알 때문에도 좀비 신의 사제가 뉴스 마치베기 슈답었다 로가 맞으면 손에 사변 찍네 얘가다 근데 끼워야 돼다 자와 미기들이 마도 지금 드링가상을 쪽에서는 이게 얘가 될이야 아니 고코르 자와 가리면 오마신 데딩 손으로 자디도 좀비 냐바동을 한주다 슈답사디 당부 슈잡사디 예 가리 최체바 대다 탐지 아니 뇨몰 내구도 내구민도 세디 최땅 토지다 소구리스 디 총바이나 아니 고물루루기 탄다 아니 강시 리버덴베 체 세디 신에다 좀 전에 거린 친구이 좀 전에 알라 동반이 때서 알라 chanju심 나서 디지고르면도 디나로 강시 리버덴베 체 강시 리버덴베 체 세도 리버디 조 가르스나 조 등진을 내베 리버디 아니 디니 코나 잡수지 세도 디 송년디 키란을 하서 좀아서 제장에 키란을 야 잡수로 유스 단 돔데 딜리도와
אז כמה מחשבה שלרבוצ'ה מוביל פה, מתחיל או מעורב בהכרה בכך שיש מסורות שונות בתוך הבודהיזם הטיבטי, מסורת הניגמה והאקדיה.
In terms of the way of engagement with the Dharma, then sometimes we do, especially with the Tibetan Dharma, we do come to the Dharma sometimes through the sort of four or five different schools of related to Tibetan Buddhism, so Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, Gelug, and also Bön sometimes. So, or it could be, maybe Jonang. but the four main Tibetan schools of Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, and Gyuru, and sort of putting that aside, putting that way of sort of engaging with those particular practices for a moment, I'll explain how the differences in those traditions arose. But what we need to do is, putting those aside, we need to identify, first of all, what is the real essence of the Buddhism and the Buddha's teachings, and in terms of what is this kind of pure, real essence, the kind of real root or seed of all of the Buddha's teachings, and primarily all of the things that, or all of the teachings that were given, all of the things that were spoken, were for the purpose of eliminating the mental afflictions. So then, what we have to do. Identifying that, we then have to look at what is the kind of nature of the mental afflictions, what are the different ways in which the different mental afflictions function, and also and sort of being very clear and being able to identify those very clearly, and then understanding that just to try and directly eliminate the mental afflictions directly is very difficult, and it's also almost impossible to directly eliminate all of our karma, but instead understanding that both the mental afflictions and the karma, and all the suffering that comes from that, can be eliminated by eliminating the self-grasping which underlies the mental afflictions, the three poisons and karma. And so then you get a series of Buddhist tenet systems, such as Vaibhashika, etc., the four systems of philosophical tenets, and which gradually develop the view of determining the view of shunyata, or emptiness, but in a context where they still that view does not do harm to the dependently related world, and so each of the tenet systems has their way of explaining that. But then if we look at the sort of final view, which is presented by Nagarjuna, and here where he then he presents this as a final view of emptiness, and here in this then on the basis of Nagarjuna's sort of presentation of the view of emptiness and the way in which that emptiness does not harm dependent origination, then you see the different views of emptiness arising from Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, Gyulu, but they're based in the sort of Nagarjuna's main understanding, and then you see some differentiation of view. Also in the tantric systems, where the things are not being explained on the level of coarse mind, but being presented on the level of subtler minds, and the way to accomplish sort of accomplishments through the engagement with the subtle mind. And here again, all of those traditions have presented techniques and practices based on using subtle mind for the purpose of accomplishing the path. And so again, you see differences in the traditions of Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, and Gyelu. But what this means is that all of those teachings go back to the very common seed. They have one kind of seed, and then what you see are many branches stemming out, which grow out from that one sort of tree or common seed. But what the situation we have now with most of us is that we are completely confused about all the different branches, so we don't really understand very clearly what each of the different branches are saying. We have no idea that they all come from the same root, and therefore we have this very sort of confused situation. And what we really need to do is ask ourselves, whatever Dharma practice we're doing and we're engaged with, is it harming mental afflictions, and is it sort of reducing and harming our mental afflictions, particularly our mental afflictions? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. So not getting caught up in these, sort of branches, etc. And then we need to and so then this connects to the verse that I mentioned before, where we talk about Nagarjuna says, I have gratitude. Why do I have gratitude for the Buddha? The reason I have gratitude for the Buddha is because he was the one who spoke the words of reason. And what is that reason? That main reason reflected there in the verse is the reasons, or the sort of reasons or understandings which help us to be able to harm self-grasping. So here we connect, whatever our Dharma practice is, to be able to harm the self-grasping and therefore eliminate karma and mental afflictions. And then he says, I have gratitude to you, the Buddha, and it says, only to, Adachi says in the verse, only to the one who speaks those verses of wisdom. So then what Nagarjuna is saying, you, the Buddha, are the only one who spoke these reasons, which explain and how to harm the self-grasping. So therefore, I feel sort of faith and gratitude to you, but I'm not taking sides out of attachment to you, but for this very reason.
단다 디 식제디 지난주 니마 따바르시 다 산지 초조마직 등구여기나 야고스타요레 에네 디 단다 식제 공부로르고 식제디 야고 지제 단지 디 지난주기 남바 산지비 임비 콩델야 아니 샴바 좀제만고 셰고예요 말에 공부로르 코랑기 숭디 고비치디 샤베나 미지 계제티지 지난 아니 답변아 지기 출루로 교르체 다 소소기 아니 되만에 추주디 지기다 가리임be 있나요 아니 단다처럼 나추 가르치는 정규여 봐 시도점배 나추 디 챔비 나란주 추 패면 추될 구주 투주스 케미도 랍데벌레 개치슈디 남바산지비기 추기 인ing부저데 고무루루 단다데 소문나시니 산지 좀 된데기 제서 장고야디 ngaran zaraji tuche zara kharasede ngarang gyuji dengzin da ngarang gyuji nyomo degi ngegi nima tawar samno tang de moji bu chawon de zambe di moji bu degi lente la ani nye jeju chebe kala sanji gi chu drel hawaje medu zambe tini khona japsu sembe yesije tobodi lenje tapto ina ani degi sosugi pride karsore da confidence 디야고 confidence 뽑아디 여베이나 아니 신의 저기 산지기 꾸지 리안 제도 소소셈 나로라 거기 지 초와 섬임이 잡지 제토야지 당 아니가 남바 인슬라베이나 또 신의 꾸지 여베 선로버지 차야도가
So here, in terms of this verse that I mentioned, I do not favor the side of the Buddha, nor do I harbor any hatred towards Kapila and others. Whoever speaks words imbued with reason, that person I shall accept as a teacher. This verse would be very good to sort of recite and contemplate, just as in the same way that we daily recite the verse of refuge, which is very good, of course. But this quote is almost a way to sort of define being a Buddhist, or how we are how it means that we are a Buddhist. And so this quote gives us an excellent reason as to how we are a Buddhist and why we're a Buddhist, and you don't need many other reasons beyond this. For particularly, I can give the example of those who may have previously been in another religious tradition and have changed their religious traditions and changed to the Buddhist tradition. And people, of course, may ask you, why previously you were in this following this religion and now you're following Buddhism, and why are you studying and practicing Buddhism these days? And then you could almost recite this verse, or the meaning of this verse, by saying, Nagarjuna gives us the essence here of why and how we should be a Buddhist follower. And where he says, so your answer would be, the reason I follow the Buddhist teachings now is because I see the urgency of how I see that the self-grasping and the mental afflictions and the self-grasping in my mental continuum are making me unhappy. And in order to, and the thing which gives me the greatest sort of answer, the ability to answer and transform that happiness, is the teachings which are in the words spoken by the Buddha, imbued with reason, to help me to overcome that self-grasping. And so this is a sort of, this then allows, there's nothing greater than that sort of way of engagement and meaning. And so this gives us our answer as to, not just to others, of course, but also to ourselves as to why we're a Buddhist. This gives us a pride and confidence as to how, why we are a Buddhist and why we are following the Buddhist teachings, and it gives us a strong sense of feeling of confidence and not quite pride, but sort of confidence that I am a Buddhist, and this is, and this reason alone is a good enough reason. We wouldn't need any other further reasons to explain why we feel grateful to the Buddha and follow the Buddha's teachings.
נוכל אז לפתח עוז רוח ולפתח ביטחון בתרגול האישי שלנו. ומעבר לזה גם זה יתרום באופן כללי להרגשה מיוחדת, להרגשה טובה מיוחדת בתרגול האישי שלנו. ועל ידי כך אנחנו גם הופכים את העיסוק שלנו בבודהיזם לדבר שיש לו משמעות.
딘제 인도 전배다 단다 상지 좀된디기 안에 단다 직계라 친구 쉬지 송야디 안에 결혼 다감 캐남지 세주와 세제다 세션도 레월 달랑아인가 라마르 체 규지르민 시 고바 좀zen도 체네 마차스 아니 디기 도디기 제소 갈송 요르시도 잠베 아니 간살라마데 쳬르데 시치 랍저스견요레 제상가 디마노르바치아스 다네송데 쳬체단데 마노바치 간살라마데 쳬르데스 다데네마 뎨바시디 연구르바다 단다 데이터 건자와스 단다 카두 차금도 디 셈나르 즉 샤베이나 신에 다 산지기 쳬디 간사기 제수 마탕바 아니 쳬기 제수 탕바레 스라두 점베 아란조기 짬로지 쳬베가로 있네요. 삼로 망슈 당사디 최군조의 강세. 아니 최군조의 랑귤의 직 토규 여대매 신의 양내 양도 따져 지역으로 슬라드 점비 신의 아니 아주 베제다야 계심으로 세티. 예. 안 베제다야 디 컨디스다고 그래서도 아니 베제데 로벌다 아니 지 냠바성이 피고요 말이 양내 양도 아니 저도 최고 요레스 다 단기가 안 저기 주된된 고마죠. 그러나 아니 강로마 껴버려. 강로마 껴온도 잠배 강로메 나로를 지난주 3로치 당비나 지준 잠배양 지난자 친구 차야디 깔래 잡는 차샤 세주요래. 직체드나. 아니 딘데 깔래 잡치 아니 잡아마서 수수 깔래도 상말라 아니 사주 람 상마양 로 차비 주고들라 엔닝지 친구 상황도 주네. 아주 심진 따지기 민톰 기나로라 데디니 두졸라 아니 분어신 시지 아니 결랑기 안졸야 최삼모 땡구도스 최삼모 땡벌 제기도스 딘데기 아니 결랑기 로드 여번나 신시 알아야 로드 딘지 나로나스 아니 가죠 알아봤다 디 장사회 쇼들이야 디레틱 야드 가려르스나 동문에 디 최군조그 삼로도스 코아요 디니들이 젠된 최지 체라버세기 달로 디무명바 랍세네 아니 까단 덴주 숑루 또바 이 로저법에 나와중에 까단 덴주 숑루로 좀 지게 인슬라비었다 까단 덴주 숑루 또바 이네 지게 안 덴지 로저법에 나와대양 제도스다 어떻게 아주 순대지고요 순대 제반나 신지 아주 가다 된주 흉로 떠발라 배수 제국이 여러마도 알아서 산지 좀 된데 되게 아주를 마손에 단들 르규나는 도스타운데 아니 지금 단 도초는 손도 계전 참여 숨도 초사오르세 지금 용기요래 아니 뒤져 통몽을 아주 단다 제바드 나로 주도 로조 가원 제비 아니 디지 땡 고야디 가르레 슬라도 젬베 또 지금 뇨모도 좀 카데자이랑 아예 깔리게 인출한주 겨부르다스 랍치티르다 디마도 신야 지금 알아서 라마 탐바야 망보지 지금 깔리시다 괴모고도 또 제베드 지금 남탈 망보 지주요래데 상아란저기 다자기 또 시제 투비기 아주 랍제 디견바디 아주 딜로 고아지네 토치 구글 봐 어디 지란주다 툴 샤로나스 네 되네 다 퇴삼치베를 뭐지 단다 디나로 레그로 그래서 우리 릭바세트 아주 단다 컨시 릭바데베 치세데 릭바디 카도 동이 도베 셰발라얀 셰마 잡나양 릭바디 아주 단다 릭바 시시제 송야지 리그리 대 내가 또 첨부도 다단다 주주도 제지신지 시잡샤기니 엔테네 아주 산이네 마 하고 계시 대중으로 봐.
And so in relation to in relation to what's being said here, there's also the very famous verses stated by the Buddha where he says, monks and wise ones, just as or bhikshus and wise men, just as a goldsmith would test their gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing, so must you examine my words and accept, but not accept them merely out of reverence for me. So this gives us a very clear context about how to rely on the Dharma. And actually then there's also another teaching called the teaching on the four reliances, where the very first one says not to rely on the Dharma person themselves, the kind of personality of a Dharma teacher, but to rely on the teachings that they give, on what they actually teach, and to not make and not to be mistaken. Don't mistake these together. So to rely on the Dharma, not on the sort of Dharma, the personality of a teacher, but on what they're saying. And this ties in very clearly with refuge, where we say that of the three jewels of refuge, that the Dharma jewel is the most important of the kind of real refuge. We sometimes say it this way, and then we should check our own minds to see whether the real Dharma refuge has been accomplished within our own minds or not, and constantly checking to see whether we are accomplishing the jewel of the Dharma within our own continuum. And so therefore we have to sort of the way we have to sort of look at how to study. Why? Because it's said that studying the great texts is important, but then we also think about how is that important. It's not just sort of reading them without very much without very much sort of impact, but reading them in a way that helps to get rid of clear away our misunderstandings and darkness. So in the prayer to Manjushri that we read at the beginning of the beginning of the teachings, there's a verse at the end. I just find there's a verses at the end where it talks where it says about how we recite the verses in order to we recite the mantra of Manjushri, and then we sorry, I'll find it for you. We recite the prayer to Manjushri, but then we recite the mantra Om Arapasadani, and at the point after that, we say, I bow down to Manjushri, and recite Arapasadani, and then it says, with the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, awaken my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. So we make this prayer to Manjushri in order to, for this purpose. It's like a request, or what we call a sort of, a kind of request, or we beseech Manjushri in order to help us to develop this the illumination of this intelligence, which clears away the darkness of our mind. But this also involves hard work, as we can see. This is not something that just happens without a lot of effort, because we see this very clearly in the sort of history of the Buddha himself, where in the Sutra tradition they talk about the Buddha working for 3 countless eons in order to be able to attain fully enlightenment, and also in the sort of the life history of our Buddha, where he continued ascetic practices for many years in order to achieve his result. And so therefore we understand that it takes great effort in order to do this. Sometimes we get confused because sometimes in the histories of some of the sublime gurus, there's this there are these presentations of how some of those gurus achieved realization with hardly any perceived effort, and then, but this is. But we have to really understand the sort of stages of how we engage with hearing the teachings and then contemplating those teachings, and particularly, as is mentioned in the verse, teachings which are imbued with reasoning. And this may not immediately talk about reasons which help to explain them and help to lead us to the meaning of emptiness, but also what are called the 4 reasonings. This I'll explain a little bit about now, and then we'll move into the text itself when starting tomorrow.
וחשוב לחשוב על כך, כי לפעמים מקבלים את הרושם עם למות מסוימים, עם מורים מסוימים, שללא מאמץ מצידנו, הם יוכלו מצידם לתת לנו את ההבנות הנכוחות, להעניק לנו את ההבנות הנכוחות. אז למרות שיש לפעמים איזשהו רושם שהדבר הזה אפשרי, אני חושב שעדיין אנחנו צריכים לחשוש, צריכים להכיר בכך שעדיין נדרש מאמץ מצידנו. וכדי לעשות זאת, מאחר שהבית של נגשמה התייחס ללוגיקה, והמילה לוגיקה טיבטית היא ריקפה, ויש פרשנויות שונות למילה ריקפה. ריבוצ'ה אמר שאולי יש לנו זמן במפגש של היום לדבר על 4 סוגים של ריקפה.
Oh, sorry, there was I missed one piece where it talks about, in the praise of Manjushri, it talks about how he completed the stages through the stages and grounds of the paths, and then so he worked hard to go through the stages of the grounds of the paths to attain his state of enlightenment. Not much time right now, so. First, the reasoning of dependence. Oh, sorry.
다 티죽기 리바세야 돼. 다 티죽 창면 안로니 짜치셔럽직디 티죽기 리바세야 돼. 태바세야 돼. 예 셈르디 태송. 디 군에 전에 양타버샤세. 섬로 땅에 들라 티죽기 리바세. 균제 양다기 제소 창제 아니 예바니야기 다 디게 출루 초단데라야 딘시리베 토네 용도 준비 딜 티죽기 리바세. 되네 릭바 시바데라 춘이지 리바세 되참베 아니 베나 better shareholder and Benam Shajundo, any Meggy Rangshinti Kura Tsawares. Tilia, Jumjin Shugue Kayomare, Korang Rangshinri, Kui Chuniri, said. The dig ripachi yoya, di, Tilla Chuni ripas. Teda Tamji Tenla Paviagi, Ta, Tembu Yonya Jida, Putawaji never near Yonya la, Bena Jundetin Jungi nere, and it Kaso Tene Tabe Tinjung in a re, and it Tene Kaso Pinjun to Ripat in the re, and it Pena Tandang di Tandalabana, Chuni riba, Alhavado Chuni riba, Tombani Tenla Pavi riba, Jig Chevy, that's Pachita Sani Gabaki, Sani Warring with a Tanda Dabwes came into Tada Tamji Tenla Paviagi, Semnang Aranzugi, Dire, Samiagi, never near to Viach, as a letang ball scuta. O Dileta, Ripo Shi Gane, Anganzo Kutanda Jeremichi, Molam Juniore, any Tanda Tamsam, or the Molam de Dembe Gablaya, the Jimmy Dongo to say. Gundungi Tarman, which is Sonche, Niedi, Nienam, you did the service would do gore. Tene Jigi, Casore, Jitter Turbe turn a requeshi. Rava Ranzu, Katsut and that Tosha Judi, any Nin that send to Zukadu Chumbina, and it didn't request Shigi Tone, young, some no corne, Jitter Turbe and Yendo to the Sujan, some general, some Namjo Louis, Tesum Chevrolet shows. 단 태솜지에 매버지 영화를 쇼고 세다 단다 지준 잠배한 몰람되다 디직버도 시도고요. 디직버 치세디. 어다 디 중보이나 아니 가란 주기 퇴중기 시럽, 삼중기 시럽, 곰중기 시럽 세지. 시럽 숨게고도 선배 당보 퇴발 때니 아니 가로지기 더바디야 랑고요. Tini Tobody along to the Tobody map so good. Tobody Susu Lang Madon Mission Belana, Land of Tomare, Tobody Susu Lang Guyore, Tobo Susu Lang, Tobody Susu Meva Suedi, and Kariki Sedu, Tata Tiru Ribati. Digi just Tandi, and never some Jung never near one to Zambe, Ripayandal Tini, and some Jung never near one to Zambe, and it's Shine some Jung Gishirap set. Samjungi Sherab Digi never near Digi Nyoanda Nimaji Guliketo Chungsuna, Gomjung said Italian. Says the digital any Maje Pardo, Anzo Yomoto Soma Kade Jagi in Slana, that's how I jo to Yakorayomare. Says the Digi Aranzo, the Kulundi Nyapardo Aranzo, Tajigi Chechewo, some Nijila.
And so then in relation to what's called the four reasonings and four kinds of reason, I'll go into these a little bit this evening, and then we'll begin the main text tomorrow. So the four reasons are the reasoning of dependence, the reasoning of sort of functionality or efficacy, the reasoning of logical proof, or can also be talked about in terms of the something as being correct, so determining things to be correct or reasonable or correct or logical. And then the reasoning of the nature of things. So the first one, the reasoning of dependence, would be that way in which we think about things as a particular phenomena relying on other phenomena. So, for instance, something which is short, that's short relying on tall. So those two being a kind of having a dependent relation. The second level of sort of the reasoning of what's called efficacy or functionality is this level at which things rely on sort of the relationship between causes and effects, and particularly sort of determining how effects arise from their causes, and also examining whether effects arise from conditions in accord with certain conditions, or arising in concord with their causes or not. So that's sort of examination of that, sort of reasoning and examination of that. The third form of reasoning is the reasoning of this logical proof, to sort of examine whether things are sort of correct, whether they're viable or tenable, and sort of get on the basis of that from gaining sort of ascertainment through correct signs and reasonings of the way in which things exist, and that involves a sort of particular the way in which we search for, look for, and examine things using these reasonings of logical proofs. And the fourth reason is the sort of reason of the reasoning of the nature of things, or nature. And so in one sense we could say an example of that would be how it is the nature of fire to be hot. So in a sense the reason is that that's just the very nature of something. So that is the reason of nature. So here all of these reasons sort of lead us to sort of examine, carefully examine, for instance, the level of dependent arising or dependent origination in causal dependent origination. So the relationship between causes and their effects, and therefore the reliance of causes and effects, the dependent related nature of them. Also in terms of their their mutual dependence and mutual reliance or dependence on each other. So also the dependent origination at that level, sort of relative, sort of dependent relativity on that level, and the way in which one phenomena relies on another. But particularly here, it's particularly here one of the very important of these four is this reasoning of logical proofs, which helps us to sort of determine, using logical sort of structures and reasonings, and examining very carefully how to determine really how things really are. And so using these four ways of reasoning, using these four modes of reasoning, as it's said in one of the prayers, where day and night we examine through the four reasons how things exist, and then we cut away all of our superimpositions about the way they're accepted, and sort of we cut away all of our doubts, and sort of gain ascertainment of the way things are, using on the basis of the four reasons. So that's there's a particular prayer that His Holiness has often mentions, and I also try to remember this, particularly after class. I can just actually and then here, just as in the Manjushri prayer, where we're trying to develop, we pray to Manjushri to help us develop our reasoning. Well, here we also sort of develop our wisdom. The prayer to Manjushri to develop our wisdom. So here we have the three wisdoms: the wisdom of hearing, the wisdom of contemplation, and the wisdom of meditation. And here, the first of all, the wisdom of hearing is actually sort of listening to teachings and presentations. But then what we have to do is really we bring up our doubts, because in order to be able to eliminate our doubts, we first of all need to raise up our doubts. And this is not we raise our own doubts, so bringing up our own doubts and then looking at them in a kind of logical perspective. That's the wisdom of hearing. the wisdom of arising from contemplation is where we, working through those logical reasons and kind of proof statements, we're then able to develop a sort of inferential cognition of the way things are, and when that arises, that is then we can say that's the point when the wisdom of contemplation. And then when we're able to really draw that into our own kind of mental continuum and have a real mental experience of that understanding, that's at the point at which we have the wisdom arising from meditation. And so with that, then and until that point, we're not really able to face head on, to challenge our mental afflictions and the three poisons. This point at which we get to the point where we're able to actually develop that experience in our continuum of the wisdom of meditation. And so that's the sort of path we need to follow in order to develop our Dharma practice, that we need that sort of sequence of increasingly developing our wisdom in order to be able to properly counteract, face head on the mental afflictions, the three poisons, and the self-grasping.
Today, Trinity Shashorva. Today, Olam Karto.
So we'll leave it here. We'll leave this here for today, but and then we'll do a few dedicatory prayers before the end of for the dedication for the merit of studying here. So we'll just do a few of the dedicatory prayers at the end. The one that I was mentioning before was, having thoroughly investigated in accord with all that I've heard day and night through the four reasonings, mind born of reflection on these topics of contemplation, may this discernment sever all doubts. And then the praise to praise connected with Manjahir. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train, just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality, and just as like San Mantabhadra as well. And then encircled the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chenrisi, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And then the prayer of Bodhicitta, that may this precious holy mind of Bodhicitta, where it may arise where it has not arisen, where it has risen may it not decline, but go from strength to strength. So we'll also recite this verse that I mentioned, this verse, the one that I've just recited here, tomorrow. And good night. Yes, she's just checking if you know the time. For those who are listening in English, I won't be able to translate for the first 45 minutes. I'll be able to translate, but I have something which I'm not able to change, and so I'll be there won't be English translation from